So I recently went to my Dollar Tree looking for some terracotta pots, which they did not have, but then I found a big display of cotton yarn and I was needing some cotton yarn for another project, so I grabbed these 5 fun colors. A few days later, I found myself once again in my Dollar Tree looking for some other items, and I noticed that they had some new yarns in, so I went over to look and see if I wanted to grab any more colors of the cotton, and while I was looking at the yarn, I discovered a display with crochet hooks. Specifically, I found they have some ergonomic style crochet hooks. Now, do I need another crochet hook? No. Did I buy another crochet hook? Yes. And here's why. I bought this one because it has kind of the padded handle, almost an ergonomic style handle. Basically, the handle's a little chunkier. So I picked up this hook. I have yet to use it, but I'm going to start using it, and then I will do a little synopsis and review of this dollar store hook. And I'm gonna let you know at the end of the video whether I think this is an amazing deal or whether there's a reason that it's only $1. So I'm gonna get it out of the packaging here. And I wanna talk about some things with this hook before I set out giving it a try. So first, if we look up close, this is a tapered crochet hook versus an inline. If you're not familiar with inline versus tapered, see how this top hook, how it comes to a point right there and then it slices in sharply? That's called inline. See how the bottom's kind of flat? Whereas with the tapered one, every part of the hook is rounded. So the tip at the end is rounded, and this little hook part there is also rounded. So when I hold them side by side here, hopefully you can see the difference. Now, some people don't have a strong opinion on tapered versus inline, but a lot of people do. And usually what I find is the people with the strongest opinions usually like the inline style hook the best. But personally, I am not a fan of inline hooks. I like the tapered hook style the best because with inline, I find that I tend to snag and split the yarn a bunch, whereas the taper just seems to work more smoothly for me. So since this dollar store hook is a tapered hook right off the bat, it's got some points for me. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't have bought it if it were an inline hook. So right off the bat, that might eliminate this hook for you if you have a strong feeling where you very highly prefer inline hooks over tapered. But if, like me, you prefer the tapered or you don't really care either way, just know that this hook is a tapered style hook. Some other things about the hook just straight off right out of the package is the plastic isn't soft or squishy at all, it's just hard plastic. And it's pretty lightweight, which I don't know if I'll like that or not. I like my hooks to have some density to them when I'm working with projects, but I don't want them to be super heavy that I'm getting fatigued, so we'll see how this one goes. And then lastly, here is the shape of the handle. The thumb spot here gets wider and also a little flatter, and then the rest of the way down the hook is just rounded. Now, something I don't know that I can show on camera, I don't know if it'll pick it up, but I definitely noticed, is with this little divot here, there is a bump right here, so let's see if we can see my finger slide along. So there's like a deep groove here, a smaller groove here, and then a little bump right in the middle. So that's kind of a little strange, a little annoying. That honestly feels like it's gonna line up right where my thumb sits. So that might kind of be a pressure point on my thumb and might be a little annoying. And I don't know if this is by design or if this is a defect or if they're just all this way just because not much thought was put into these. I'm not really sure, but in my particular hook, the thumb indentation goes pretty deep right here. It kind of bumps up right there and then a little bit back down. So now that we've got a feel for the hook straight out of the package, let's go ahead and give it our first trial run using it. All right, so it is day 1 of using the Dollar Tree hook. I have yet to use this. Today, I am going to just work with some Red Heart yarn, and we're just gonna work in rows back and forth. Now, this is my very first time using it right here on camera, and initially what I was going to do was I was going to come up with some like larger project and work on it and actually make something, but then I quickly realized I have too many other projects that I'm working on, and none of them need a hook this size. So I'm just going to each day do a little test. So today I'll work rows back and forth. Another day I might make a granny square. And I'm also planning to do a little like amigurumi type shape thing just to test the hook and see how well it works for different things. But so far, working the chains seemed pretty normal. It is a little strange that it kind of hits right here. I'm just not used to that. I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. It's just a little different and I'll have to, you know, figure out the tension and everything. And I almost feel like it'd be more comfortable to hold it like this. I think this is called pencil style. I could be wrong on that. I typically hold it more like a knife. And again, I might have those names backwards, but I think this is more like the knife hold. So it is a little goofy because I am aware of it being bigger, but it's gliding very nicely and it feels very comfortable in my hand. So it's probably just a matter of getting used to it. I'm just gonna work some double crochets back along my chain, continue kind of getting a feel for it. Yeah, it definitely feels like I'm holding something a lot bigger, like back here in my hand. I'm definitely aware of it down here, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's a bad thing. Mostly just different. Now, one thing I am noticing as I work these double crochets is that I tend to grab onto my fabric that I'm working with just because of how I keep tension. So like right here I'm yarning over and I want some tension on this, so I'm holding the fabric with my thumb, and then I go to the hook and then through my project. So that is a little weird because it almost feels like the thumb grip is kind of in the way of holding onto it, but it's not the end of the world. Again, it's gonna take me a little bit of getting used to. That is something that I'm noticing kind of off the bat here. It does feel very comfortable overall though. A lot different than what I'm used to, but pretty comfortable overall. So I'm gonna keep working on this little square throughout the day, and I'll let you know tomorrow how this went and show you day 2 of using this hook. So it's now day 2 of using the Dollar Tree crochet hook. I worked up this little square yesterday, and I've got some thoughts on working on it, and I'll talk through an issue I ran into while I work on today's test swatch, which is going to be a granny square using some Hobby Lobby I Love This cotton. So basically what I found when working with the hook is that after a little bit of working with it, it was pretty easy to get the feel of it. It didn't feel so awkward after a while. However, what I did discover is that this hook has a little bit of plastic along the metal shaft of the hook, and that little piece of plastic kept snagging and catching the yarn. Now with a yarn like Red Heart, like I was using yesterday, that's not too big of a deal because if it snags a little bit, it's already not the softest anyways, it's not super silky and fine, so it'll survive it. But for a yarn that's softer or finer, that could definitely be an issue. So I'm gonna try to figure out a way to file that down. Now as I'm working with the cotton yarn, I'm not finding it snagging on that little plastic piece, so that's good at least. And working in the round doesn't feel much different than with any other hook. Again, I'm kind of getting used to the feel of this hook as I work with it more and more. So overall, besides just needing to get used to the feel and the flaw in the plastic that snags the yarn, I've been pretty happy so far with this hook. So I'm gonna keep working with this hook today, and I'll come back tomorrow, work on another little test project, and I'll share my thoughts on how making the rest of this granny square went. It's now day 3 of testing the crochet hook from Dollar Tree, and I was working on this large granny square using some Hobby Lobby I Love This cotton yarn. So today I'm gonna do a little miniature amigurumi thing, probably just make like a little sphere using some Hobby Lobby I Love This yarn. And while I work on this, I wanna talk through something I discovered while working on the granny square. So you might remember how I showed the little plastic piece that seemed to be snagging my yarn and how I was kind of upset by that, but I was like, you know, I'll find a way to deal with that. Well, what I ended up doing was using the side of a pair of scissors, or you could use a knife, and I just scratched that part away, and it came off very nicely and clean. So I was like, awesome, no more snagging the yarn. Except that the yarn did keep snagging, and what I realized was there was a spot on the back of the hook that was snagging the yarn, and I hadn't realized it when I was working with it. So my first thought was, I need to sand this down, I need to file this off somehow, but I didn't have any sandpaper handy, so as a temporary fix, I put a piece of Scotch tape around the hook, and that worked really great. I made sure to overlap the sticky ends of the tape on the front where my thumb sits, so that way the sticky edge of the tape didn't snag the yarn, but that solved my problem completely. It worked really great. But I still wanted to try sanding it down. So we took it up to my dad's workshop barn, and we did a little bit on the belt sander, and that was way too rough. It got it off, mostly, but it was way too rough and really scratched up the back. So then I grabbed some 220 grit sandpaper and by hand filed it off. And it's still a little bit rough, but there's no big nub. So I think this will be okay to work with. Honestly, I would probably opt for the tape option over sanding, and I might still put tape around it just to make it smoother. But if you want to avoid that entirely, check the hook when you're deciding which hook to purchase and make sure there's no plastic pieces that might snag the yarn. So anyways, now I'm working on this amigurumi little project here. And as far as amigurumi goes, I really don't notice any difference in the hook. I'm able to get my tension plenty tight with the stitching. The hook doesn't seem to make a difference with that, so that's good. But I'm gonna finish up this little sphere, and then I'll join you again tomorrow and let you know any more thoughts and show some more test projects. It's day 4 of our test, and yesterday I did a little amigurumi thing. I have no idea what this was supposed to be, but as far as working amigurumi with the thicker hook, I didn't notice a difference. I was still able to get that really tight tension with my stitches. So today I'm going to do a little test with some Caron Simply Soft, and the reason I'm going to do a test with this yarn is because this yarn will be very obvious if it snags. And I think when I was working on the amigurumi project that I was having a bit of snagging going on still. It wasn't too bad with the cotton yarn, but I think I might still be snagging here at the base a little bit. So I'm just gonna work with this yarn for today and see if I still have snagging issues. And then I've got one more day of testing, and then I'll give you my final thoughts on this hook. All right, it's day 5, the final day of testing the Dollar Tree crochet hook. So I was working in this Simply Soft yarn and I noticed a little bit of snagging here on the side still, maybe a little bit of snagging from the back. And I definitely at times felt the back where I sanded just kind of rubbing against the fabric. However, I don't think it's making a difference as far as the finished product. I don't think it's snagging it enough that it's actually going to damage the yarn or cause big snares or runs in the yarn. So even though it might be snagging a little bit, it doesn't seem to be impacting the final result. So today for my 5th and final test, I wanted to work with some crochet thread. I believe this is a size 10 crochet thread. And normally, of course, you would use a smaller hook with the crochet thread, but I want to work with it with this larger hook because one of the things I was concerned about with this hook is how well I'd be able to manage things like tension. And so by using different sizes of yarn, it forces me to need to adapt with my tension, and with a normal crochet hook, I'd be able to adapt just fine, but I want to see how difficult or easy it is with the thicker handle hook. So I'm just gonna work up a little rectangle here with the crochet thread. I'll tell you how that turns out, and then I'll give you my final thoughts on the hook to wrap up this video. All right, so I just worked up this little square here, and I gotta be honest, I really didn't notice any difference with this hook than any other hook with working with crochet thread and just the tension and everything. It seemed to go fine, and the thicker handle didn't seem to make a difference, good or bad. So final thoughts of this hook. Do I like it? Do I hate it? What are my thoughts? Well, most likely I'm gonna grab myself another one of these hooks, probably in a 5.5mm or 6mm crochet hook, and I give this an A+ rating overall as far as crochet hooks go. The biggest issue I found with this hook was the rough sections, and while it was annoying that at times it seemed to snag and grab the yarn a little bit, in all honesty, it didn't make a difference in the finished results. And with most of the yarn, I didn't notice it after working just a couple rows and didn't notice that snagging anymore. As far as working with a hook with a thicker handle, it's honestly seemed fine to me. Now, I will say I haven't worked with any other thick handled hooks with like the ergonomic handles, so I don't have that comparison of this compared to say like a Furls hook, but it was pretty comfortable to hold. I did like the chunkiness of it. It had a nice grip to it, and the hook was very comfortable in my hand. So if you're learning how to crochet, I typically recommend that people buy a boy crochet hook because they're inexpensive and they work great. But I'm going to have to change that. I will now be recommending that you grab a hook from the Dollar Tree simply because it's only $1. The boy crochet hooks are pretty cheap, and this is even cheaper. And I honestly think that it would be really nice to have the thicker handle when you're first learning. I always recommend that you learn to crochet with thicker yarns, thicker hooks, because it just makes everything easier to see, easier to work with. And I think this would be a great beginner hook. And if you've been crocheting for a while, I wouldn't necessarily recommend go out and replacing all your hooks with these, but I also wouldn't recommend against it. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you try one of these hooks from the Dollar Tree, let me know how it goes for you. And I also might have a follow-up video to this where I attempt to dip the handle of this hook into like a dip rubbery coating and see how that goes, because hey, it's only $1. If I ruin the hook, it's not too big of a deal, but I'll let you know how that goes if I try it. But thanks for watching and happy crocheting.